Hi, this is Emily Midget from 6th Street Sundries. Since I've done a few videos focusing on zig markers, I thought I'd do a video featuring one of my other favorite mediums, Prismacolor pencils. One of my favorite techniques done with Prismacolors is coloring images on colored cardstock. This technique can also be known as black magic, but I am using colored cardstock instead of the black. I have a few tricks to getting smooth, vibrant, no-line coloring on this colored cardstock, so let's get started. First, I'm stamping the main floral image from W+9's A Kind Soul stamp set onto some magenta colored cardstock using white pigment ink. I've chosen to work with Papertrey Ink's white pigment ink because I like how smooth it is when it dries, but you can use whatever white ink you might have. I use the white ink instead of a comparable colored ink, in this case magenta, because one of my tricks to get smooth coloring is to first lay down a layer of white colored pencil before laying down my colored pencils. The white ink seems to blend more seamlessly with the white colored pencil to create a beautiful no-line colored look. After laying down my initial layer of white, I then turn to the colored pencils. As with watercoloring, the key to getting great depth and dimension with colored pencils is to add layers of color. I tend to use 4 to 5 colored pencils for each flower, starting with one dark shade, a medium shade, and at least one light shade, then going back after the initial blending to add in an even darker shade as the shadow. I will list all of the individual colors that I used for this project in the YouTube description, as well as on my blog. I prefer to work petal by petal. I find it easier to determine where to add shading when I have individual petals to work with. I start by laying down the white colored pencil on one petal, then adding the second darkest shade around the edge of the petals. I always start with the darkest shade, then blend into the lighter shades, because that ensures that the darker shades won't disappear into the lighter coloring. After I have laid down the first initial layer of color, I then take my Prismacolor blender pencil and blend the colors together to create a seamless transition. I have found that the layer of white beneath the color helps the color maintain a beautiful vibrance that I think makes the flowers just pop off the page rather than simply soaking into the colored cardstock. After I have used all of the colored pencil on the larger anemones, I go back in with a black colored pencil and very lightly add a few swipes of black on petals that I know would be shadowed, because they are on the bottom layer of the flower. Each flower stamp is different, so after you initially stamp the image, try to look at each individual flower to determine which petals would be in the front of the other petals. Those petals towards the front would be lighter, while the petals in the background would have darker shading and shadows. To successfully add black to a light colored image, my method is to add just a touch of black to where the front of the petal in the back meets the petal in the front. I then use my darkest colored pencil and blender pencil to blend out that smidgen of black and create a shadow. The addition of the black really helps the image pop off the paper even more, but you have to be careful not to add too much black, because then you can completely ruin your image. Add a very small amount to start, because you can always add more, but you can't easily take it away. I also like to add a smidgen of black to petals that are simply tucked behind another petal, like the one in the front here, because it helps add definition to the edge of the petal on top. The petal on the top will always be lighter than the petal tucked beneath it, and that touch of black blended into the petal below really helps to emphasize that depth. For the Morning Glories, I chose to use a sunny yellow combination. Now, Morning Glories and pansies can be tricky because depending on what kind and color you're trying to mimic, the shading is the opposite of your normal shading instincts. Basically, while I would normally make the center of the flower the darkest and then blend out into the lighter shades toward the edge of the petals, the center of the Morning Glory is the lightest shade, blending out into the darkest shade at the edge of the petals. To create these flowers, I again will work petal by petal, laying down my white pencil layer, then adding the color to it, beginning with the darkest color and working my way into the lightest color. I used the dips in the edge of the petal as well as the little marks toward the center of the flower stamp to determine where each petal is, and therefore where I should concentrate my shading and shadows. For time's sake, I've only shown coloring 2 petals because the technique is the same on all of the flowers. Hopefully that is enough to give you an idea of the technique involved. Before adding my greeting, I trimmed the finished colored panel down by 1/4 inch on 2 sides, then heat embossed my sentiment from Kind Soul using white embossing powder. When I have a meticulously colored image, I like to keep the rest of the card fairly simple so as not to detract from the coloring. For this card, I chose to simply use my T-ruler and my white colored pencil to draw some lines around the edge of my panel to frame the colored image. Using the T-ruler helps to easily get lovely straight lines. It's definitely an inexpensive and very useful tool for your craft room. I mounted the colored panel onto a panel of black A2 sized cardstock using dimensional foam adhesive. And that's it. I hope you've enjoyed seeing this card come to life. I had to move more quickly than I would have liked in order to keep the video at a decent length. So if you have any questions, please feel free to send me an email and I will try to answer them as best I can. It's amazing what adding a few extra layers of color can do to really make an image pop off of a piece of paper, and colored pencils really lend such a unique and lifelike feel to an image, so I hope you will give this technique a try. You can visit my blog at emilymidget.com to see more of this technique. Thanks for watching!